The woman in the white dress danced with another man at my wedding. Not a slow song with her father. Not a silly group number with the bridesmaids. The first dance. The one that was supposed to be ours. She chose him. And I let her, because by then, I already had the hotel footage on a flash drive in my jacket pocket. 3 days before the wedding, I drove to the Ridgemont Hotel on Route 9. We booked the honeymoon suite for Saturday night. I wanted to leave a bottle of bourbon and a handwritten note on the bed, a surprise for after the reception. The girl at the front desk smiled when I walked in. "Back again," she said. I told her this was my first time here since the booking. She looked confused. "Oh, I thought you were the gentleman who came in with your fiancée last night. Sorry, my mistake." I stood there for about 5 seconds. That's all it took. I asked her what the man looked like. She described someone tall, dark hair, well-dressed. She said they'd checked in around 8 and left a little before midnight. I didn't raise my voice. I asked if I could speak with the manager. Turned out it was Phil Barker. I'd rewired half the second floor for him 2 summers ago. He remembered me. I told Phil I needed to see the lobby camera footage from the night before. He didn't ask why. He pulled it up on his office monitor and stepped out. Megan walked in at 8:07 p.m. The man beside her had his hand on her back. I knew his face. Darren, her best friend from work. They walked straight to the elevator without stopping at the desk. Phil came back with a flash drive. I sat in my truck in the hotel parking lot for maybe 10 minutes. Then I called my older brother, Wade. Told him what I saw. He said cancel the wedding. I said no. Wade asked if I'd lost my mind. I told him I hadn't. I just found it. The wedding was in 3 days. Venue paid. Caterer confirmed. 86 guests with plane tickets. Megan's parents had covered half the cost, and my mother had pulled from her savings for the rest. But that wasn't why. I wanted Darren in the room. I wanted Megan in the dress. I wanted every person who'd spent months listening to her talk about her perfect relationship to see the lobby footage with their own eyes. I spent that night planning. The venue had a projector. We'd rented it for a slideshow of us through the years. I called the AV guy, told him I had an updated file for the presentation. He said I could load it myself on the day, just plug in the USB. Wade drove over around 11. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "You're sure about this?" I told him I'd never been more sure about anything. He nodded and opened 2 beers. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Megan texted me at midnight. "Can't sleep. So excited for Saturday." I typed back, "Me too." The next 2 days were the strangest performance of my life. I kissed Megan good morning. I confirmed the florist. I picked up my suit. I smiled at the rehearsal dinner and shook Darren's hand when he showed up as one of her guests. He looked me right in the eyes and said, "You're a lucky man, Cale." I said, "I know exactly what I have." Thursday night, Megan went over the reception playlist with me. She'd added a song I didn't recognize for the first dance. I asked whose pick it was. She said a friend from work had suggested it, a song that meant a lot to her. I didn't flinch. I wrote down the song title and moved on. Friday night, the rehearsal dinner. Megan's maid of honor, her sister Jules, pulled me aside. She said Megan had been a little distant the past few weeks and asked if everything was okay between us. I told Jules everything was exactly where it needed to be. After the dinner, I loaded the flash drive with the footage. I tested it on my laptop twice. The lobby camera caught everything. The walk-in, the elevator, the timestamp. No audio needed. The image was enough. I put the drive in my suit jacket pocket and hung it on the closet door. Saturday morning, I woke up at 5. Megan was still asleep. I looked at her for a long moment. Not with sadness. Not with anger. Just clarity. I grabbed my suit, walked out, and drove to Wade's to get dressed. The ceremony was at 4. Small church on Maple Avenue. White chairs, sunlight through stained glass. I stood at the altar and watched her walk down the aisle. She looked beautiful. I'll give her that. The vows went exactly as rehearsed. I said mine without a crack in my voice. She cried during hers. The guests loved it. Wade stood behind me as best man, and at one point he put his hand on my shoulder. I knew what it meant. After the ceremony, the reception moved to the Hillcrest Lodge, a converted barn with string lights, long tables, a wooden dance floor. The projector was set up on a side table near the DJ booth, aimed at a white screen behind the head table. The slideshow was supposed to play during dinner. I'd already swapped the USB. The reception started smooth. Cocktail hour, appetizers, Megan circling the room like it was her night. Darren sat 3 tables from ours. His wife, Christine, was next to him, a quiet woman with short brown hair I'd met once before at Megan's office party. I watched Megan laugh at something Darren said across the room. Then she turned and caught my eye. She blew me a kiss. The DJ announced the first dance. Megan walked to the center of the floor. I stood up, but she didn't reach for me. She turned toward Darren's table and held out her hand. "This one's for my best friend," she said into the mic. "The person who got me through the hardest year of my life." The room went quiet. Darren stood up. They danced. Nobody moved. 86 people watched my wife dance with another man at our wedding. Some smiled, thinking it was sweet. A few looked at me. I stood by the head table with my hands in my pockets. Wade leaned over and whispered, "Now." I shook my head. Not yet. The song ended. People clapped. Megan came back to me, squeezed my arm, and whispered, "Don't be jealous, babe. He's just a friend." I smiled and said, "Of course." The toast started 20 minutes later. Jules went first, sweet, tearful, forgettable. Then Wade stood up. He kept it short, something about brotherhood and knowing what matters. He raised his glass, then looked at me and said, "And now the groom has a few words." I walked to the mic. The room settled. I looked at Megan. She was beaming. I said, "I had a slideshow prepared. Photos of us. But I think a different kind of memory is more honest tonight." I clicked the remote. The projector lit up the screen behind me. The hotel lobby appeared in grainy security footage. Timestamp, Wednesday, 8:07 p.m. Megan walked in, Darren's hand on her lower back. They crossed the lobby and stepped into the elevator. The footage ran for 30 seconds. Nobody spoke. I turned back to the mic. "That's the Ridgemont Hotel. 3 nights ago. That man is Darren, her best friend. The same one she just gave our first dance to." I set the mic on the table and walked off the floor. The room broke open behind me. I heard chairs scraping, someone gasping, Jules yelling Megan's name. I didn't turn around. I was halfway across the parking lot when Wade caught up. He didn't say a word, just walked beside me. We got to his truck and he drove. My phone started buzzing before we hit the main road. Megan, her mother, Jules, a number I didn't recognize. I turned the phone off and put it in the glove box. Wade asked where I wanted to go. I said my shop, the small garage I rented on Industrial Drive where I kept my tools and supplies. He dropped me there. I unlocked the bay door, pulled a chair to the workbench, and sat in the quiet for a while. But not long. I had work to do. I opened my laptop and typed out a message to Megan. Short, clear. "I'm filing for annulment Monday morning. Don't contact me. Anything you need to say it through a lawyer." Then I sent a second message to a number I'd saved 2 days earlier. Christine, Darren's wife. I wrote, "I'm Cale, Megan's husband. I think you need to ask your husband where he was last Wednesday night. I'm sorry." I closed the laptop, pulled out a job estimate I'd been putting off for weeks, an office building rewire in Granton. I started filling it out. It was the first time in 3 days my hands were steady. Monday morning, I walked into the county clerk's office before it opened. Filed for annulment on grounds of fraud. The clerk read the form, looked up at me, and said, 72 hours since the ceremony?" I said yes. She stamped it without another word. On my way out, I checked my phone. 14 missed calls from Megan. 1 voicemail I didn't play. 3 texts from Jules. The first angry, the second confused, the third asking me to at least talk. And 1 message from Christine. "Thank you. I had no idea. I'm taking the kids to my sister's." That one I read twice. Tuesday afternoon, Megan showed up at my shop. I saw her car pull into the lot through the bay door. She stepped out in jeans and a sweater, no makeup. She looked like she hadn't slept since Saturday. She walked in and stood in front of my workbench. I didn't stand up. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I know," she said. I set down my wire strippers. Looked at her. 1 sentence. That's all I needed. "You danced with him, Megan, at our wedding, in front of me." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She stared at me for 5, maybe 6 seconds. Then she turned around and walked back to her car. I picked up the wire strippers and got back to work. The annulment moved fast. Megan didn't contest it. Her lawyer sent papers agreeing to the terms. No shared property, no disputes. We'd only been married 72 hours. There wasn't much to divide. I got the shop, the truck, my tools. She kept the apartment and whatever gifts hadn't been returned. It was clean. What wasn't clean was everything around it. Megan's mother called me once. She didn't yell. She said, "I wish you'd told us privately." I told her I wished her daughter hadn't danced with her lover at our wedding. She hung up. Jules texted me a week later. For what it's worth, I didn't know. I believed her. I didn't respond, but I believed her. The guys on my crew didn't ask questions. They'd seen the story spread through town like a brush fire. Small city, big wedding, bigger footage. One of them, Danny, said over lunch, saw it on someone's phone. "You've got more nerve than anyone I know." I told him to finish his sandwich and get back to the panel box. I threw myself into the Granton project. 12-hour days. Dragged the crew out there at 6 a.m., didn't leave before dark. The building owner was thrilled. I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it because every conduit I ran, every wire I pulled, was something I could hold in my hands and know it was real. Megan moved out of the apartment 2 weeks later. I heard she went to her cousin's place in Trenton. A month after the wedding, Christine called me. I almost didn't answer. She said Darren had moved out. She'd filed for divorce after she found more messages, not just Megan. 2 other women from his office over the past 4 years. He'd been running the same play for a long time. She said something that stuck with me. He's losing his job too. HR opened an investigation after his wife, me, filed a formal complaint. 3 women in the same department. They're calling it a pattern. I asked if she was okay. She said she was angrier than she'd ever been in her life, but that anger was keeping her moving. I understood that. She thanked me again. I told her she didn't owe me anything. After we hung up, I stood in the shop doorway and looked out at the empty lot. For a second, just a second, I felt something close to guilt. Not for what I'd done, for how public it was. For Christine sitting in that room watching the footage. For Jules crying in the parking lot. Then I remembered Megan's hand reaching for Darren's. In front of me. In front of everyone. The guilt passed. I locked up the shop and drove to the Granton site. We had an inspection in the morning, and I wanted to check every junction box myself. If there was one thing I'd learned from the past month, it was this. Check the work before someone else finds the problem. 6 weeks after the wedding, Wade and I went fishing at Baylor Lake. We hadn't done it in years. He brought the rods, I brought the cooler. We sat on the dock and said almost nothing for the first hour. Then Wade asked, "You hear from her?" I told him Megan had sent one email. Long, detailed, full of explanations I didn't ask for. How Darren made her feel seen. How she didn't plan for it to happen. How she still loved me. Wade asked what I did with it. I said I deleted it. He nodded. Good. We fished for another 2 hours. I caught 1 bass. Wade caught nothing and blamed the bait. On the drive back, he said something I didn't expect. "You know, Mom wants to know if you're eating." I laughed. First real laugh in 6 weeks. I told him to tell her I was eating fine and pulling more work than I had in 2 years. That part was true. The Granton project finished ahead of schedule. The building owner referred me to 2 more contracts. By the end of that month, I'd hired a 4th guy for the crew and started bidding on commercial jobs I wouldn't have touched 6 months ago. I wasn't building a life to prove anything to Megan. I was building it because I finally stopped waiting for someone else to tell me what the plan was. 8 weeks after the wedding that lasted 72 hours, I drove past the Ridgemont Hotel on Route 9. I didn't slow down. Didn't look. I had a job site to check in Granton and 2 bids to send out by noon. The 4th guy on my crew, Marco, was already on site when I pulled up. He handed me a coffee and said the inspector had greenlit the 2nd floor. I drank the coffee, walked the floor, and checked the panel myself. The annulment had been finalized the week before. 1 signature. 1 stamp. Done. Darren lost his position at the insurance company. Christine got the house. Megan was still in Trenton. Jules mentioned it in a text I didn't ask for. I read it, put the phone down, and picked up a tape measure. After work, I drove to a diner off Route 22 I'd been meaning to try. Sat at the counter. Ordered a steak, medium rare, and a beer. The waitress asked if I was celebrating something. I said,